welcome to episode 53 of the Plug in Play podcast. I'm your host, Henry, and this is your checkpoint for video game news, reviews, and hot takes that nobody asked for. We got another packed show. Are you used to hearing me say that? This time, the big news around town is Ubisoft. What the heck is going on with them? They've completed their restructuring efforts. They've canceled many a game, including the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. We're going to go into the details, see if Ubi can pull a rabbit out of a hat on this one, because they need a magic trick to make this work, it seems. Along with Microsoft Xbox's Developer Direct. We got Fable talk, Forza Horizon, Double Fine's next project, and of course, Pokemon's next project, Game Freak, of course, because they've always made the best games of all time, right? That's what Pokemon is. And then, of course, Highguard's come out. We'll talk a little bit about that briefly, along with impressions, which include one of last year's big darlings of the Game Awards, which was Dispatch. Didn't get a lot of awards because it came out late in the year, but I think it got a lot of praise from a lot of people. So going through my impressions on that, and Super Mario Galaxy 2, played that over the weekend. Fun time. Well, I mean, I probably can just give you my impressions now. It's a great game. Did you know? The highest reviewed platformer of all time? Yeah, it's good. But we'll get into that a little bit more in the impressions section. But before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. Why don't you follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all at Plug and Play Pod 1. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, whatever you prefer. We're everywhere. I somehow, for some reason, put everything all over the place and see what happens, just what sticks. And if whatever you want to stick, give us a follow, give us a like. It means a lot. You can also give us a comment on any platform. I'll read that out here on the show if I deem it conversationally relevant. You can also send us an email at pluginplaypodcast1@gmail.com. I'll read it on the show because I love you. You're my best friend, and I want to interact with you in every way possible. And obviously this podcast is supposed to be, in some way, a conversation. So why not be a part of it? I'd love to hear from you. Speaking of which, if there's something you do or don't want me to say or hear me say, you can jump around in the description. We have the timestamps. It's a labor of love. I do it for you. I said I love you before, and I mean it. I did it again with the timestamps. So go just jump right to my Super Mario Galaxy 2 impressions where I just say it's really good. And that's that. I mean, hey, maybe that's just all you care about. It just could be. So that's the housekeeping. How's it going? How are you doing? Have you cut your hair? New haircut? Changed your outfit up? You look great. Weather out there, it's frightful, right? It's really cold. Very good time to play video games. Video game podcasts skyrocketing. Probably, I don't know, not mine, but everybody else's probably skyrocketing. Stay warm out there. Got friends in Austin, got friends in Nashville, and it's weird. The Southeast being cold. You don't see it very much. It's and when it happens, we're not really ready for it. It's very dangerous normally. I know the Northerners tend to scoff at that because they are ready and prepared for things that involve snow, but we here in the South are not as much. So keep warm, keep playing games, and maybe listen to the sultry, soothing sound of my voice. Many other S words describing the sounds resonating from within your ears. Maybe I'll keep you company on a cold winter's night. You know what I'm saying? All right. Moving into the comment corner, we have, I think I mentioned the last episode, we've kind of changed some things around on the socials. We've moved away from AI. We're now just kind of putting trailers on top of podcast clips. Dang, engagement is down. You'd be surprised. No one's telling me to kill myself anymore. That's a major improvement, but nobody's interacting with it either, which isn't pushing the clips out to the algorithm, which is very, I mean, right? It's people ask for one thing, but in the process of asking for it, hurt what they're actually asking for. Isn't that weird how that works? You engage with something hatefully instead of just scrolling by it, and you're actually helping it way more. Odd how the algorithm works in that way, but it is how engagement works. It's how it happens, and that is what I'm seeing is much more positive reception. I'm getting more followers, more likes, and the comments are certainly more positive overall, but engagement is down, views are down. So growing the community, it's finally, because nobody would follow me with the AI clips. Everybody just kind of hate watched me and then moved on. But now it's like, well, people are watching, but it's just far fewer people, and the people that are watching are enjoying it more. But you still have to have it go out to a larger number of people in order to find those people that will enjoy it at all. It's just kind of statistics, mathematical performance there. The more people, the more likely you are to get people who like it. But we only have one comment this podcast to go through, and that is from Dragon Order 18 on the YouTube comments. This is on the Switch 2, the Switch 2 sales talk that I had last episode. So he said, I wasn't sure if I wanted to grab it early or not. I was definitely something worthwhile or not. But finding out how much the older content was running better, it warmed up a lot more for me. Even Pokemon Scarlet/Violet turned into a much better game, and the biggest improvement was Dynasty Warriors style game. That is true, Dragon Order. See how every comment I've read up into this episode has always been like, I hate you. You're the worst. I don't agree with anything you're saying. And then it's this guy, and he's like, I really like what you're saying. It's funny how AI just turns people into just very aggressive commenters. But I very much agree with Dragon Order here. I think the major conversation point around that is, yeah, Nintendo's done a great job making their old library accessible on the Switch 2. A lot of games have gotten updates. We just got a couple of days ago a Donkey Kong Country HD update, which added an entire new character and Switch 2 updates and all sorts of other stuff that they didn't need to do. I don't know how many people were really asking for that either. So they've really gone above and beyond to make the Switch 2 a home for Switch 1 games, which is not what they did for the Wii U to the Switch. They had to remake all those games and then just sell them a la carte. In this case, Nintendo is putting out a lot of like $20 upgrades that give you a little bit more content. A lot of those I've completely passed on. I have no interest in like a Super Mario Jamboree Switch 2 update or the Super Mario Wonder update that adds like more multiplayer modes or something along those lines. I don't really care about any of those updates, and I'm not going to pay $20 for them. It seems a little egregious, maybe 10, but not 20. But Sony has done the same thing in the past with their I believe it was $10 upgrades from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5, and all you were really getting there was maybe a graphical update and frame rate updates, which totally not worth it either. So I guess Nintendo is giving you more in that way. I also think that the reason all these updates are possible, that they're there, is because a lot of these games were not developed with the current hardware in mind. I think the Switch 1 kind of overstayed its welcome. I think Scarlet and Violet is a very good example of this. Scarlet and Violet is well known for the Switch 1 to run absolutely horrifically. I remember the Switch 2 patch coming out, and it was a gif of the windmill. There's a windmill in a specific town that's like the centerpiece of the area, and in that area, or in the original game, it's like running like a freaking slideshow. It's like 5 frames per second. It's horrific. It's absolutely embarrassing in all honesty. But then in Switch 2, once you play it on the Switch 2, which by the way is a free update, that's like you don't have to pay for that one. It's running smooth. It looks like it actually was intended to be made on that hardware, which I think is very likely. That Scarlet and Violet was more than likely a Switch 2 game and came out on the Switch 1, and they had to really mess that game up. And that game is known for being a mess on the Switch 1. Still got okay reviews somehow because it's Pokemon. They get away with murder over there at Game Freak. But I think that he's absolutely right. Dynasty Warriors obviously is going to be another big one that's going to be improved because everybody knows Dynasty Warriors games have hundreds of enemies on screen at the same time, and Switch 1 just was not powerful enough to handle that kind of stuff, at least in the same capacity as any other modern hardware was. So anything that has an update for the Switch 2 that's a Dynasty Warriors or Muso style game, those are easily going to start, like, the frame rate's going to look better. The number of enemies you're going to have on screen will likely be increased. I haven't looked too far into those, but I can only imagine. It's so much more efficient on Switch 2 rather than Switch 1. So I appreciate Dragon Order 18's comment. And I hope to hear from any of you viewers in the future as well. Just drop a comment anywhere you want, anywhere we are, and I'll talk about it. I'll bring it up. So, on to the news, my favorite segment. I love talking about the news. I'm just your regular paper boy. Ubisoft, get your newspaper here, Ubisoft. That's more of like a hot dog stand guy. Did paper boys in like the what is it, like 30s? I don't know. I really feel like I'm making myself sound pretty stupid. I don't know when paper boys were around. 1920s. Whenever black and white photos were around, paper boys on the side of the road, trying to hawk papers at people. I don't know if they sounded like a New York hot dog guy, or somebody at a baseball park trying to throw you like a beer or something like that. But anyway, news. We got Ubisoft. Ubisoft is, of course, we talked about them last episode as well. Seems like they've been going through a lot. Over there at Ubisoft, and they got a lot more going on now, too. So Ubisoft has initiated a company-wide reset. So we already know Ubisoft has separated all their major IPs into a separate division of the company, separate entity, and that is now partly owned by Tencent. That's going to be comprised of your Assassin's Creed, your Tom Clancy's, your Far Cry's, all the big IP. But they still have 1,000,001 other little tiny things over in the corner that everybody kind of thinks about every once in a while, but not often. So what are they going to do with those? Well, they're resetting, and they're going to put them all into buckets. They're going to say everybody is going to have a genre that they are specifically entitled to. They're going to be focusing on a specific kind of game, but in the process, they've canceled 6 games, including the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, assumedly the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake, which both of those delays are kind of crazy because both of those games were heavily implied to be almost like ready to go. Like Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake was rumored to be released like a week ago. So they really recently made a massive pivot there. They delayed 7 other titles and they closed 2 studios, which we already knew about, but that was kind of confirmed here in the absolution of all of this, the combined news. So the 6 canceled games did not meet Ubisoft's new quote-unquote enhanced quality expectations, including the Sands of Time remake, mobile title, and 4 other unannounced games, likely the Black Flag remake, including 3 original IPs were canceled. By the way, I'm quoting VGC. VGC is easily my favorite news outlet amongst the gaming journalists, so definitely check them out. That's where I get all my news. They always do a great job. So they cancel a lot of freaking games. I would say The Sands of Time remake has clearly been through a lot. This game was announced a long time ago. It received a lot of backlash. The gameplay that was released did not look very good. It was not running very well, and so they pushed it back a while. They pushed it back several years, and then re-announced it, saying, "Yeah, we're still working on this. We'll get it out the door eventually." And then kind of went dark on it for a really long time. And then rumors started percolating as of literally last week, saying, yeah, this game's going to be coming out any day now. Literally just going to be shadow dropped for the masses. Everybody's going to be able to play this in the coming hours. And then now we have the announcement of it's canceled. This is a game that trophies have already been achieved for. Like, this game was sent out to press. People already had hands-on impressions of this game. I would love to hear somebody's impression of it. Clearly, they were under NDA of some kind, so nobody's saying anything, probably for the best in their specific case. But this was a game that was under development in the Ubisoft India studios. They have like a Mumbai studio, I think, that was primarily in charge of it. There was also a support studio helping out with that as well. And I saw some rumor that it was only in development by one guy. Like, I don't believe that, because 2 different studios were working on it. That was some nonsensical rumor that just got upvoted because people were shocked at this and trying to find some sense to it all. Sense to the madness. But clearly, whatever this game was absolutely horrific. I mean, the fact that they're willing to take an absolute and total loss on this game that's been in development for so long, not only so long, but that was likely just, you could make money if it was already done, you could just make money off of it. Just push it out. And they believed that the backlash, the harm it would do to the company and to the IP itself was so bad that they would rather just write the entire thing off, even though it is completely done. That tells me this game must have been a trash fire. It must have been so horrifically bad. But it's a remake, and based on the footage I've seen, it's a remake from the ground up. It's more like Final Fantasy VII Remake is a remake of Final Fantasy VII. It's like, okay, we're saying it's a remake, but it's not really a remake. Like, it's more so just a game very similar to the original in multiple ways, but the gameplay, the modernization behind it is so incredibly advanced and different that it really is a different game altogether. So, I don't think it's as easy as simplifying it down to like, well, Ubisoft can't remake their own freaking games. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I do think it is a little weird that they had the blueprint for a game, they had a massive IP behind it, and it shouldn't have been a massive flop. Like, no matter what, this is Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. If you don't remember, that game was a big hit. It was a massive hit back in the PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube era. Yuri Lowenthal, I believe, was the voice of the prince. These are just I've played it a while back because it got re-released on PS3. And I played it there, and it was fine. Like, I didn't think it was bad at all. But it was known to be one of the first like time games that people really appreciated back in the day. Time mechanics like slow-mo. Oh my gosh, it was so prevalent. It was in every game. Slow-mo was in every freaking game. You had Blinks the Cat. You had Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. You had the Matrix games. These were all games that people would talk about and enjoy because of their time mechanics, their bullet time mechanics. And that became a very prevalent feature in a lot of games. You still see bullet time in a lot of games. But like Prince of Persia: Sands of Time was one of the ones people would always point at and say they really did that right. You could rewind time in the game. You could fast forward time. You could pause time. So it definitely dealt with a lot of those things back before. You probably think of that and think, well, that sounds so trite and so unoriginal now. I've seen it done in a million different ways in a million different games. It's like, well, that was really the first one to really do it and do it well. Also, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which we don't technically know was going to be one of the games that was canceled. However, we haven't heard anything about it. We were expecting to hear things about it at this point, and now we're hearing freaking 4 unannounced games were canceled. There is a high likelihood that Black Flag Remake was one of those, which also doesn't make sense. Ubisoft tends to not give a frick about their Assassin's Creed IP. I don't say that as like they pump out horrible games, but they do pump out a lot of Assassin's Creed branded stuff. And maybe they're taking a look back at this and they're saying, look, we're devaluing the brand of this a little bit, and Assassin's Creed is something we really can't afford to make seem less valuable. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about like Assassin's Creed India, Assassin's Creed Russia, Assassin's Creed China. Like these are games you probably didn't know existed, but have been like not mainline Assassin's Creed titles, but have been Assassin's Creed spin-off titles that are on mobile and now have been ported to, regular consoles. I've played a couple of them just briefly, and they're just bog standard side-scrolling platformer action games. Like, it's nothing crazy. It's not like the new Prince of Persia game that flopped. That was a Metroidvania that everybody really enjoyed. It's like really bog standard, like B team, even maybe like C or D team stuff. So like maybe they looked at this as like a potential devaluing of the IP. We really need to focus on making it a big deal. So cool. I think that is something that probably wouldn't have hurt. Black Flag is considered to be one of the best Assassin's Creed games. It even inspired the Skull and Bones spin-off. It really not a spin-off really, but it took the mechanics that were so beloved from the pirate seat stuff in Black Flag, and they turned it into Skull and Bones, which of course nobody liked. But still, I thought Skull and Bones wasn't that bad until it got into the horrific live service game elements. But I was actually kind of looking forward to the Black Flag remake. I don't think I was going to play it anytime soon. I've played Black Flag before, and I could still technically play it if I really wanted to. But yeah, that game is really, really good, and I would have really liked to have played it again in a time where I didn't have a million other games to play. But that's unfortunate. They also canceled 3 original IP. I think it's worth noting that they even go on and comment on this and say, look, making new IP is really hard. It's really hard to succeed with new IP. And I think as we can get further into this, I think because there's a lot to really dig into, I think you're going to see Ubisoft is taking a much more structured and careful approach to the games that they're potentially trying to make. And a new IP absolutely is a risk and a lot of high value if you succeed, but it's very unlikely for a new IP to typically break into the market in a major way. So yeah, focusing on your tried and trues like an Assassin's Creed or something like that is normally how you're going to want to approach most solid business business decisions. That's what EA does. EA is doing fine. And well, they've been bought, but before they got bought, they were really just making the same sports racing games over and over and over again. These are genres of games and titles that traditionally sell incredibly well. There is low risk to them. People are going to buy them over and over and over again, and you have a very heavily installed fan base there that will continue to buy them. I think Ubisoft is probably trying to move in a little bit more of a strategic way in that way, I think. The 2 studios that were closed are Halifax and Stockholm. These were previously announced. I don't remember Stockholm being announced as a closure, but Halifax was. That's when we talked about on the last episode. They recently unionized and they were immediately shut down. Honestly surprised that more people and more studios were not laid off. And I think in the coming weeks, you're going to see a lot more studios roll. Stockholm, if you didn't know, was one of the support studios on games like The Division. So wasn't a massive loss, wasn't the big studio, but Ubisoft has so many studios, so many people, they have to start cutting. They do it more. I guess I'll go ahead and say this. They then, I think a few days after this announcement of restructuring, propose cutting 18% of the French headquarters at Ubisoft. So a very big cut there. It says propose. Propose is very much a keyword here. They're in the process of talking about it. That is because of French law. When you are dealing with the French, most people there, or at least in this particular case, are unionized. So you have to actually come to an agreement with the union that you're allowed to lay these people off. So they're currently in talks with the union of doing that. It also seems like a lot of these people are going to be contract workers, so not direct Ubisoft heads, and that's why you're probably not seeing that headline as much. But absolutely, I am with Ubisoft cutting heads here. If you aren't familiar, Ubisoft as a whole employs more people than all of Sony, twice as many people as EA. There's a significant number of heads at Ubisoft for what seems to be a similar, if not lesser, output. So, in my opinion, a perfectly understandable reason to cut heads. If you are producing and getting a return for less money for each head you have at a company, it's just a normal business practice to start looking around and saying, hey, maybe we got to get rid of some people. So it's understandable there. So now on to the big thing. And I think this is really what you need to focus on here as the larger impact to gamers as a whole, which is the creative houses, as they're calling it. So there's going to be 5 creative houses, each one with a distinct genre or focus, and they're really encouraging these to each work autonomously. So from what they've stated in the press release, they're expecting these guys to have full financial control, full creative control. Basically, each one of these houses is kind of working as its own entity, and then there will be support studios that kind of bop around between all 5 of them. But for the most part, the creative decisions are going to be made within one central house. So there's not going to be as much bureaucracy, there's not going to be as much red tape, and it's hopefully going to move a lot faster and encourage a lot more creative and cooperative experiences, which I honestly kind of appreciate and like, at least from the surface. I don't see an issue with this. So one of those creative houses is Vantage, which we already know is the subsidiary that is owned by Tencent or has a minority share by Tencent. So your Assassin's Creed, your Tom Clancy, your Far Cry. That's Vantage. So it's considered its own creative house. Creative house number 2 is a cooperative and competitive shooter experience house. So they include the IPs that would be listed here as The Division, Ghost Recon, and Splinter Cell. Creative house number 3 is operating to foster a select and sharp live experience for stuff like For Honor, The Crew, Riders Republic, Brawlhalla, and Skull and Bones. So basically, your live service experience. Anything that has a long tail and a lot of transactions to try and get from players, we have in Creative House 3. Creative House 4 is focusing on fantasy worlds and narrative-driven universes. Examples given are Anno, so that's like a tactics game, my understanding. I've never played Anno. Might and Magic, Rayman, Prince of Persia, and Beyond Good and Evil. This would probably be the studio I'm most interested in. I would honestly think that and they kind of get into this, but this would be a studio that probably wouldn't produce as much revenue. Like I feel like it seems Ubisoft is really swinging for the fences with a lot of their projects at this point, and I think that single player narrative experiences, while I love them, are not your big swings. Like, those are your games as a service. So I'm glad that there's still a house for this. I'd be interested to see how much focus it gets in comparative to the other ones. And then Creative House number 5, which Ubisoft says is aimed at reclaiming our position in the casual and friendly family games, which honestly I didn't know they had lost. But if you remember anything about Ubisoft's family division, you'll definitely remember stuff like Just Dance. Uno is a very popular game that they produce there, and then Hasbro games as well. So those all seem like, honestly, a very good way of divvying it up. So you basically have, in summation, your shooters, your live service, your fantasy and open worlds, and you have your family games. And I think those are probably, if somebody said we're trying to divvy these out into buckets, I'd probably say that's the way you should do it. I think your expertise around live service games absolutely needs to be consolidated. You don't need that spreading to everything like an Assassin's Creed game having games as a service elements. I've always seen that as weird and unnecessary. So I don't like that kind of melding across other genres in that way. I would love for all of these disciplines to be focused on by the people who are good at them, and I think that's what they're doing. And I also like that family games is kind of put off on its own. I obviously don't care about family games, but I know that those are major sellers. Like Just Dance is a massive success. Every year it comes out. There's a huge casual audience that shows up for that. And I even go to I went to MomoCon in Atlanta, and there was a Just Dance competition. It's clearly a thing people care about in a large capacity. And I'm all for it. I mean, it's fun for fun's sake. It's a casual experience, but I don't want that to be taking away from my more hardcore experiences as well. I never think it was, but I'm glad that it will be focused on solely by the people who are good at those things. It just makes more sense to consolidate the knowledge, consolidate the creative power within these houses. So I like that. Ubisoft goes on to say, quote, "Our two core pillar plans for our strategy are open world adventures and games as a service native experiences." They're going to be focusing significantly on reducing costs, which I've already kind of gone over is headcount. They also, fun enough, enforced a mandatory work from office policy 5 days a week, which, guess what that means? It means we're trying to get you guys to quit voluntarily. They also have a program for people to voluntarily resign. They've been doing that, though, so that's nothing potentially very new. But in this case, this is an obvious, this is coming along the backs of we need to reduce headcount, so come back to the office or you're fired. And that's, yeah, what a lot of companies are doing. So overall, I think you should say Ubisoft is trying to really maximize profit. They're trying to do something they should have done a long time ago, which is reduce costs. Ubisoft has always been a bloated studio, and they're trying to make games better. I think give them the focus that they need and the creative control that they need, at least more so than what Ubisoft was previously giving them. Then shareholders responded with a 33% drop in the company's stock. This is a massive decline on top of a massive decline. I was looking at their financials or the stock ticker for the past several years, and I believe in 2018, 2019, the company's stock was worth $105 a share. It is down to below $5 a share. So it has decreased by over 95%, a 95% drop in the less than 10 years. That's real bad. This is also the time where their peak was they were releasing South Park Stick of Truth, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It was a very I looked back at the year, and they had several big titles that came out that year, and I was like, oh yeah, that is definitely when Ubisoft was at their peak. And it's so weird to see Ubisoft fumble it so hard. Obviously, Ubisoft has been the major studio that just refused to adapt. They have always been the studio that says, well, we're going to keep making the same freaking thing over and over, and we're going to drive it into the ground. And while I still think a lot of their games like Assassin's Creed sell incredibly well, I think a large part of their issue here is they're pumping out a lot of stuff that I don't think does as well as they really want it to. And then, maybe an Anno or a Rayman or whatever, that's probably what you're going to be seeing, produce less of your I don't even know, because they don't make Rayman games anymore, and I don't see them make that many Annos either. Might and Magics and all that and stuff. You don't see Prince of Persia anymore. Well, they did make the new Prince of, what the heck? I'm jumping around a lot. Sorry. They did make a new Prince of Persia game, and it did very well critically, but it didn't do very well commercially. So very unfortunate, because I think that game is really great. But it's weird to see Ubisoft go from I remember they were like one of the big players at E3 every year. It would be EA, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and Ubisoft would be, and then of course Bethesda had theirs for a little bit too. But most of the time I remember growing up, EA and Ubisoft were like the two non-major publishers that weren't like owning a console that had a direct like press conference at E3, because they were a big deal. They produced a lot of games, and a lot of games they produced were really good. And now it really does seem like Ubisoft has fallen on their laurels. They aren't trying to make very many creative decisions that are interesting or different. A lot of people are sick of their repetitive nature of their open world games, at least the design behind them. And I get it. I think that Ubisoft is doing what they can here to try to turn the ship around. I still think Ubisoft is misguided, and I don't know how confident I am of them being able to turn the ship around, but I do feel like everything I'm seeing here is good. Creative control, focus on specific houses of genres, consolidating expertise, making sure that these games are going to come out in the highest quality, clearly setting quality standards much higher than they were when they're canceling games that were pretty much already done, and reducing headcount, which I think has been a massive issue at Ubisoft for years. I think all this stuff is I can't see this going wrong, right? At least from a plan standpoint, a strategy standpoint, but a execution standpoint, I don't know if I trust Ubisoft. It actually kind of surprised me to see the stock drop, because I was very impressed with this particular plan, given how much I have trust in Ubisoft at this point. And obviously, it's shareholders are looking for something a little bit different. They're looking for immediate returns. And seeing that Ubisoft is saying, hey, this restructuring is going to cost us a lot of money. In fact, it's going to cost us an operating loss of around 1 billion euro for this current financial year. Yeah, that's enough to scare investors for sure. Not only that, but they just canceled like 7 games or 6 games and then delayed 7 others. So guess what that means? You're not making money off of those projects. So as a stakeholder, you look at that and you say, well, this financial year is going to suck. I don't want any part of this, and you sell. So I get that. But I think a long-term investment, it makes way more sense. And, Ubisoft separating out the Assassin's Creed branch, and, making Vantage, it's going to take me a while to get the hang of that one, but making Vantage a subsidiary and bringing in Tencent to give them money, pump that particular branch, it really seemed like a desperation ploy. It really seemed like a desperation ploy. I would have assumed Ubisoft would have been sold and then gutted. That's what I would have assumed, but I think you couldn't find buyers for Ubisoft. I think Ubisoft was so bloated that there was no way you were going to find anybody who would want to take on that. Because what you buy it for what? A couple $1 billion or something like that, a massive investment, and then you just kill half of it. That doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't. You want to buy the stuff that's good. You want to buy the stuff that's making money, which is what Tencent said. Like, we'll give you the money, but only if we get a piece of the pie that is the good piece. Like, we don't want the bad piece of the pie. And so that's what they did. They got Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Tom Clancy, and those are the big money makers. So, of course, it makes sense. But I don't know. I don't know. I like this overall. I like this overall for them. I'm glad that they're trying to do something to right the ship. I don't know if I fully trust Ubisoft. They have been on the decline for so many years. They've done so many things that I look at and I shake my head at and I say, oh my gosh, like what is going on over there? It seems like a madhouse. Or it maybe not a madhouse is the best word, but it seems like somebody who's really naive and really goofy is running that company. And it's obviously the Guillemets, the family-run organization, but they seem to really be making decisions that are questionable up until now. And I find this to be a little bit more optimistic, but I think that Ubisoft has a long way to go. It will be a painful transition, and we're going to see a long while, I think, before we actually see really good stuff start to come out of Ubisoft from this particular transition. So overall, I think this is a very big deal. Ubisoft is still one of the biggest publishers in the gaming industry. They still maintain some of the most well-known IP in the gaming industry. I mean, just reading off even some of the IP that stuck with Ubisoft proper, like Rayman, Prince of Persia, Beyond Good and Evil, which, by the way, forgot to mention that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is still in development. They confirmed, and is one of the projects that was not going to be affected by layoffs or anything else. Insane. No idea what's going on over there with that. That really does just seem like a fever dream that's just gone on for too long, and there is no possible way that can recoup costs on what has gone into it up to this point. I think it's lost the director. I think the original director of Rayman was in charge of it for a while, and he's gone. That's been in development for 11 years. It's gone away, come back, gone away again. Oh my gosh. Who knows? Who knows what's going on over there? The original was all right. I think it's a little bit over-regarded for what it is. A little bit, maybe people look at it with a little bit more rose-tinted glasses than I would, but it's still a great game, I think, and especially if you like a Legend of Zelda type experience. But dang, I can't believe that's still kicking. But anyway, Ubisoft. Oh, Ubisoft. It's kind of a very good way to put that into a summation. Is it a word? Summation? A summation? I don't think so. But I think we understand where I'm going with it. Next up, we have the Microsoft Developer Direct, where they kind of show off really PRE versions of their dev teams to try and make them more relatable and try to make them more like, oh, we really care about the people here. And then they force them to say scripted lines that I highly doubt that they would ever say in a real world scenario, and then it looks really kind of fake and weird that they're doing that. But okay, yeah, sure. Give us a good look at the games, I suppose. It's nice to hear from a developer. It's weird to feel like you're really heavily fictionizing the reality of what they're doing. But whatever. So we had 4 games as part of this, one of which was considered a mystery until reveal, which I was a little underwhelmed by, but it was probably the most interesting thing at this particular developer direct. So let's start off with the thing I care the least about, Forza Horizon 6. This will be an insane game in terms of sales, in terms of reception. This is going to review incredibly well. This is going to sell incredibly well. Forza is a very popular series. Recently came over to PlayStation and sold incredibly well. Very, very, very well. And they are known to be very fun, well-made open world driving games, and I played a little bit of 5 on Game Pass. It was fun. I'm not a racing game guy. Forza Horizon 6 is going to take place in Japan, a very interesting setting. I'm interested in that for sure, but I just don't know if I'm going to play this for more than 2 hours max, because I'm not a racing game guy. I'm not a car guy. So, I'll play it on Game Pass if I still have the subscription at that point. Kind of dwindling down the months that I already kind of had pre-subscribed to it when it was really cheap. So, maybe we'll see. But I know people are going to be really, really happy with Forza Horizon 6. I'm just not going to be one of those people that's super psyched. Have it in Fantasy Critic, though. Very much looking forward to that. Next up was Beast of Reincarnation. This one has a little bit more to talk about, I think, because I think it's a little bit more colorful, a little bit more interesting. And I don't just mean in the actual colors, because I actually think Forza Horizon 6 is a little bit more colorful. But Beast of Reincarnation is noteworthy because it is Game Freak's latest game. Game Freak, if you aren't familiar, are the developers of all the Pokemon games, or not all of them, but the mainline Pokemon games. That is what Game Freak is responsible for. They, of course, are kind of their own thing. They obviously have a very significant partnership with Nintendo over the Pokemon games, but we all know that Game Freak kind of just makes Pokemon games, and that's what keeps the lights on, and they have made other games in the past. The one I'm most familiar with is Timbo, the Bad Anus Elephant. Obviously not anus, but you get it. There's a few other ones that have come out. I remember hearing the names of them and saying, I don't even remember those. So, what I'm trying to say is, I don't really have a lot of faith in Game Freak to make a good game. I understand that Pokemon games are made with a shoestring budget. It's very weird that Nintendo has seemingly no interest in funding a well-made Pokemon game. They seem to always come out with glue and spit and duct tape wrapped around them, and seem to be somewhat rushed out and hardly iterate on themselves in most cases. It is kind of weird to see. So, because it's literally the most popular franchise, most successful and profitable franchise ever. If you think Mickey Mouse, Pokemon is way above that. Winnie the Pooh is like number 3, and Pokemon's number 1. Anything else you can possibly think of, Pokemon has outsold it in some way, shape, or form. It is number 1 biggest IP in the world. So, obviously the money's there, but they never give Game Freak any of it, which I guess the games are not a driver of that. Maybe it's the cards, maybe it's the show. I don't know what is driving merchandise. Maybe that's what's driving all the massive influx of Pokemon sales, but I just always look at it as a video game. Like, yeah, sure, I got into it through like the show as a kid when it was originally airing, but like I really always saw that as more so an ad for the video game. And they've done a very good job kind of incorporating all of the merchandise, like the cards and everything, into kind of a seamless, IP loop that really feeds well into each other and makes a lot of sense. And maybe it's just because I'm used to the IP at this point. It's been around most of my life. So, of course, it just seems natural that there's a Pokemon trading card game. And of course, it just seems natural there's a TV show that somehow is still going. I never think about that. But yeah, it's still around. But anyway, this is a very big tangent away from Beasts of Reincarnation to basically say, I've never seen a game that I've fully thought Game Freak was it never gave me a good inclination that Game Freak is like a really good developer of video games. It seems like they have a formula and an IP that is so beloved that they don't really have to do anything with it and it will be successful. And they have never been given the ability to do much other than that. So Beast of Reincarnation is very different because it is an action game that is 3D. It looks pretty, and it looks pretty fluid and fast and has obvious Souls-like elements to it and near inspiration, like Nier Automata inspiration. I see a lot of heavy inspiration there, and I look at that and I say, that is such a massive departure from anything that they've ever made. How am I supposed to trust that this is going to be good? And you're supposed to say, well, because they've made some of the best games ever made. They've made the Pokemon games for decades at this point. And I say, that's cool. I think really those games are really carried on a very traditional, nostalgic connection to this IP. And while I even think that the Pokemon games are still fun, I think that there's significant flaws in them. And there's way better games out there at doing like a turn-based style or a collectathon style or so many different things. It's really just that they've really got it nailed down. The games are charming and so on and so forth, but I don't think they're objectively great games. And I don't think that they've done anything in a long time that really is worthy of praise. And then when you look at these games that they've done outside of that Pokemon bubble, none of them have been massive successes, and none of them have even been massive critical successes or well remembered even. So I don't trust Game Freak. Like, I absolutely don't trust Game Freak. And it seems like this is something they're clearly putting a lot of money into. It seems like the budget is high, the graphics are good, the combat looks okay. I'm not going to say the combat looks great, but it looks fine. It seems to be about, like reclaiming nature, and you're working alongside like a wolf companion in combat. You kind of have like a Final Fantasy VII Remake kind of slow down time, issue a command to your combat or to your wolf partner, and then they'll help you out. Overall, I look at this and I don't see anything crazy. Like, there's a million and one Souls-like games out there that I would say look incredibly better than this. Like, way better. Like, if you just put this in front of me and you put it next to like a Lies of P or another Nier Automata game or one of the many other, like a Phantom Blade Zero, that's another game that comes out this year. Like if you put it next to like a Phantom Blade Zero or something like that, and you say, well, which one would you rather play? I'd say 100% Phantom Blade Zero. What makes this game that much better than Phantom Blade Zero? They both look pretty similar. Obviously, there's a lot of differences in how they look, but come on. Like, clearly, this game is not standing out that much outside of the fact that it's made by Game Freak, the makers of Pokemon. But it doesn't have any significant ties to Pokemon and the design behind Pokemon and the charm behind Pokemon or anything really that relates to Pokemon at all. So like it's such a big departure. It's from a developer that's never done anything particularly great. Why should I be excited about this game? And I'll leave it to reviews, but I didn't see anything in this footage that necessarily blew me away. I didn't feel attracted to the world or the characters or the combat in any way, in at least more so than any of the many other games that look really a lot like this I have in the past, or present. So I'm not really looking forward to Beast of Reincarnation. I'm easily going to pass on it unless people come out and say, oh, well, it's really one of the best games ever made. And it's like, oh, well, now I have to play it. But, I don't expect that to happen at all. I see this game being low 80s. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say this game is low 80s. It's probably like an 81. It's fine. People are going to say there's nothing too much wrong with it. It does some things good. It does some things meh, and they're going to move on from it. I don't think it's going to be something people will remember in a large amount of time. It's interesting that Microsoft is putting a lot into this. It's also interesting that, like, at the end of the splash screen, it's like, oh, yeah, it's coming to freaking everything. It's like, well, you don't have to say that. You're just really kind of doing them a solid, but that's nice of you, I guess. Like, because Xbox isn't publishing this game. They're not developing this. They get no financial stake from this game doing well. So it's interesting that this game is even there in the first place. Next up was Kiln, the secret game revealed by Double Fine. Love Double Fine. I do think Double Fine's output is a little odd, and I don't mean that it's a creative studio. I mean, a lot of their games aren't very good. And like, I am a big Double Fine supporter. Psychonauts 1 and 2 are some of my favorite games ever made. I love Brutal Legend, and I think that game is horrifically flawed, but I think I have a very big soft spot for Brutal Legend. I think every once in a while they pump out something really magical and really great, but I think a lot of their smaller titles are really mediocre. You think of stuff like Headlander, you think of stuff like their most recent game Keeper, which seemingly nobody gave a frick about. What else? I think Chalice, the Chalice game, Golden Chalice, I think was the name of that game. I don't think I've even seen gameplay of that game. I don't even know what it is. These are all games that I think have come and gone. People didn't really care about them. They weren't necessarily a problem, but they weren't big sellers either. Specifically, Broken Age came out. That was a big deal. I don't think anybody remembers Broken Age very well. I don't think anybody loved it either when it came out. They kind of more so cemented. People were like, oh yeah, I don't think I want adventure games anymore. Stacking is another one I think of. Like, people like it, but not that much. Costume Quest 1 and 2. I actually really like Costume Quest 1. That one really, it hit me in a nostalgic spot for Halloween, but I don't think it's like a great game, and I can understand why people wouldn't care about it. So, uh, what I'm trying to say is Double Fine doesn't always make a lot of great games. They have a very interesting creative presence. They pump out a lot of games that have interesting ideas, but you're really waiting for something like a Tim Schafer Psychonauts experience, and they don't always stick to that, and you don't always know what you're going to get from Double Fine. So this is a studio that seems to be on the chopping block. Like, I'm very surprised that Microsoft hasn't shut them down, because I don't think any of their games are selling a lot. And I think it's really just a prestige thing. Like, I think Microsoft looks at Double Fine as like, well, it really is just good PR for us to have them. It diversifies our portfolio into just being more than Gears and Halo, and having a little bit more color, a little bit more creative, output. And that's about it. I think you're really counting your blessings right now at Double Fine that you haven't lost your job, because there are so many studios that they've axed. There's so many heads that have rolled, and I think that those games have done better and have better. Like, freaking Tango Gameworks got shut down after Hi-Fi Rush came out, which was a critical success. I'm sure the game sold fine, but probably didn't sell gangbusters, but it probably sold fine and was a massive success critically. I loved it. It was my fourth favorite game of that year, and that was a very competitive year. Very, very competitive year. So the fact you're alive is kind of crazy. So, Kiln. What is Kiln? Kiln is a pottery game where you make a pot. You get to make your own pot in like a character creator kind of deal. And then you have to go and run around like a little map, and you have to fight the other team's pots. It's a multiplayer game. Did I mention that? It's a multiplayer game. So you're going around an arena, you're fighting the other team's pots, and you are trying to extinguish their furnace with water. So you're filling up your pot with water, transferring it to the other end of the battlefield where they have their furnace, and trying to extinguish it. Depending on the size of your pot, you're going to have different moves and abilities. So if you have a really big pot, you're going to be slower to move, and you're going to have these special abilities that are only available to larger sized pots. If you're a small pot, you can move around and dart around, and you can just kind of peck away at people with really lightning fast moves. That is the game. I think it looks fun. I don't see this having any kind of financial future. Like, I don't see this being a big seller. Multiplayer games right now are so difficult to break into. It is, and we're going to talk about that in a second with Highguard, but it is so difficult for anybody to establish themselves in a multiplayer arena right now. It's flooded. You don't have to pay money to get into the vast majority of the best multiplayer games on the market. So if you're charging money for your game, it's already a problem. And then this looks like a game that is going to be a little bit divisive amongst a very casual crowd. I can't see somebody who plays Call of Duty or Fortnite looking at Kiln and saying, "Oh yeah, like, I'll give that a shot." Like, I don't foresee that happening. This will immediately have a niche fan base that will even be willing to try it. And then once you get past that barrier to entry, you will then have people be like, I don't really like it that much, or I'd rather play something else, and they'll dip. And you have a dead game. And yikes. Like I was saying, I think you're lucky to have a freaking job at Double Fine right now. Under Microsoft's leadership, I think you are lucky to have a job. This is a game that was a part of Amnesia Fortnite, which is actually explained in the developer direct by Tim Schafer. It's a period of time at Double Fine where they have 2 weeks or a fortnight to just make a game that they just want to make. And that's, what most people would consider a game jam. But in Double Fine's case, it's just make whatever the heck you want. And a lot of games have actually come from that particular game jam situation. They've taken ideas from that and they've put them into titles. And one of which is there's a level in Psychonauts 2 that's actually from a game jam where like you're at a cooking competition. That was a level that was actually made by a producer of their documentary Psych Odyssey, which I highly recommend. Probably my favorite documentary ever. Such a massive documentary, but so worth it if you're interested in game development at all. Truly is like the most in-depth and honest footage you will ever see in game development. To a point where they like completely showcase the firing of one of their heads of Psychonauts 2. It's kind of insane. But anyway, it's a game that came from that, and I love that happened, but I think that you need more Psychonauts. And I'm not saying, oh, we need to see a Psychonauts 3, but I'm saying, and I don't even think Psychonauts 2 sold well. I think you need to say we need more games that clearly are going to be a larger audience. And I think right now, I think the best hope you have of that, and I think honestly the best games they've made, and I say this as a very biased source who likes action adventure platformer games, but I think Psychonauts is easily the most accessible, most well received critically series they've ever made, ever, as Double Fine. So why would they not just make, I say turn your studio into, sure, you can make little games like this, but you need to really be picky about it. You need to really think about how is this really going to be received, and you need to really start saying, hey, maybe we need to start making a lot more action adventure platformer games because that's what we're good at. And that's what seems to be the most successful of our titles. So Kiln, I'm sorry, I don't foresee it being a particularly successful game. It's unfortunate. I want these titles to succeed. I want Double Fine to succeed, but I also think Double Fine has just produced such middling games that nobody really cares about. That I understand why they sold off to Microsoft. They had to. Everything I've ever heard about Double Fine is they've always been struggling. Especially if you watch the documentary, you'll see Tim Schafer talk openly and honestly about that, of being like, hey, we're constantly trying to find a publisher. We're constantly trying to find money. It's really difficult. And bro, I don't think Kiln is what kills them. I think they'd already be dead if they were on death row, but it is another step in the direction of whenever Microsoft gets tired of them, I think Double Fine is one of the first people that absolutely is the first to go on the roster. So I don't know. I'm not looking forward to Kiln in terms of gameplay, but I will probably give it a shot because I appreciate Double Fine's creativity and their spirit, and it will be a novel and different experience, and I do appreciate those. I'm not a multiplayer gamer, so that's why I wouldn't probably be looking forward to it, but gosh darn, like it's really unfortunate that Double Fine, I'm just looking down the barrel of a gun for Double Fine. It's so unfortunate because it really is a series or a developer that I respect and care about and has made some of my favorite games ever. So like I don't want them to die, but it's sadly looking like that. Speaking of train wrecks, Fable was also talked about. Is it a train wreck? I don't know. That sounds a little harsh. Fable actually looked pretty good. It's very interesting. Fantasy Critic, I like going back to this. Fantasy Critic is fun for me. I love Fantasy Critic, and Fable was one of the highest drafted games in the drafts this year, but it was also one of the highest counterpicked. This was a game I think a lot of people thought was canceled. I think it's been through a very long and tumultuous development. I think nobody has faith in Microsoft right now to produce anything of worth. A lot of their games have been clearly mismanaged, fumbled, and Fable looked like a really good potential gamble on that. The in-depth they went through was from Electric Playground. That's the developer of the game. I didn't mention this earlier, but they also develop Forza. So Forza is a big open world game, and Fable is a big open world game. That is about the crossover that developer has for this particular franchise, and it makes it a little bit of a risk, right? Like, sure, open world games are great, but an open world racing game and an open world action adventure game are two very different beasts that require very different expertise in a lot of different ways. So I don't know if I would go over to freaking Electric Playground and say, "Hey, why don't you guys take on this Fable remake?" I don't I don't know about that. That sounds a little out there. But Fable looked like an action adventure game in terms of its combat. It looked all right. Like everything I saw about this game, I was like, yeah, it looks all right. Like I don't mind that. That could be okay. We'll see. I am pegging this game as like a potential mid 80s to low 80s. I don't think this game is going to bomb based on what I've seen. I think combat looked serviceable. I think it looked potentially fun. I think it definitely looks like a developer that has not made action adventure combat before. It's not particularly, visually stimulating combat or, impressive combat. It doesn't look like it feels very good, but it looks like it fills a purpose. It does what it has to do. So I'm not saying that's a downside. The world itself looked fairly colorful. It's kind of a fairy tale world. It seems to have that inspiration here and there within the gameplay that was shown. So I think that looks good. I think the world itself, they're trying to kind of talk in points that Peter Molyneux would be. So if you didn't know, Peter Molyneux was the original director behind Fable 1, 2, and 3. He was very well known for making promises that ultimately were not kept or were highly exaggerated. Of course, one of the major promises he made about Fable was you'd be able to plant a tree. That's his most infamous promise. You'd be able to plant a tree and it would grow in real time as your character got older. And you could come back and you could find that tree and you could make out with it or something. That's just kind of Peter Molyneux and how he would talk. So Fable kind of has that element as well. Everything you do has a ramification in the world. So kind of what they gave examples of was you can go and you can buy this business or you can buy this house and you can kind of become a tycoon and people in the world will see that and they will know you as a tycoon and then your actions will have impact on these people. So like if you buy a house and then you evict the person in it, that person will be homeless and they won't like you very much because of that. And then you can, get married and have kids, and you can do that with as many NPCs as you want. And who knows though, it'll probably piss off some NPCs. They probably won't like that. And then the big thing that they mentioned was the NPCs will all have routines and dialogue fully voiced that's specific for that character and so on, and there's like 1,000 of them or something like that. That seems like the most Peter Molyneux pie in the sky thing that they said in this entire developer direct. Sure, there's thousands of NPCs. Sure, maybe there's or 1,000 NPCs. And sure, there's, dialogue that's fully voiced and unique to that NPC. Fine. Absolutely. Let's say I believe that. How deep does that dialogue go? Am I going to have a full-on blown conversation? Am I going to get to know this character and their backstory and their likes and their dislikes and, what did I have for lunch? Like, absolutely not. You're going to have a boilerplate added on kind of dialogue that's just going to be like, what they showed off of like, hey, boss. It's like, oh, well, you own the business that this person works at. Hey, boss, how's it going? And that's going to be the extent of your, chameleon-esque dialogue that's going to try to blend into your choices. Like, I don't foresee these interactions with these NPCs or this world being very deep or interesting. I think you're going to find an NPC at some point. You're going to say, yep, that's a hot NPC or something like that. And you're just going to be like, yep, you're my wife now. And that's going to be that. I don't think there's going to be a deep, robust world to interact with here. I think that seems like what they want to pose this as, and I don't believe it as far as I can throw it. I think that the story is so far fine. They kind of showed off the humor a little bit, which is what Fable is known for, having a very British sense of humor. I don't know. right now, what I'm getting here is this is going to be a good open world game. Will it be a great open world game? I think I'm leaning towards highly doubtful. I am seeing the combat being okay. I am seeing the world being okay. I am seeing the story and structure with that I know of so far to be okay. Maybe it's good, maybe it's great. But at the moment, I don't see anything atrocious here. I don't see this game being a bomb, but I also don't see it being some 90 plus game that's going to revolutionize open world games. I think you're going to get it, and people who are interested in this are probably going to say this is a good open world game, probably going to forget it in a year or two and move on with your life, which is weird because it's such a big franchise. It's been given to such a big developer, and it feels like Microsoft really believes in this in some way, shape, or form. So maybe. But right now, I'm pegging this as like an 83 to an 85. That's still really good, to be frank. That's still really good. But I'm personally going to have to wait to see on this in a lot of ways. So that was the Xbox Developer Direct. Microsoft still not talking about Gears. Interesting. That's supposed to come out this year. Supposed to be a big deal for them. Overall, I think I wasn't interested in Forza. So it is what it is. Fable, finally we see some more proof of life from that game. Happy to see it. Kiln, I think, is an interesting idea. I do not foresee it being successful, though. And then Beasts of Reincarnation makes me continue to question what the frick people think like Game Freak is. I guess people just see Pokemon and they just say that must be the best thing ever because it's the best IP ever, and that's it. I don't know why people aren't looking at that a little bit more critically. But overall, it was an okay developer direct. I still am very wary of Microsoft and what they're producing, and I don't know if right now I see this as like a big enough slate for me to look at and be like, yeah, that's a Game Pass seller for me. Fable, by the way, is coming day one to PlayStation as well. So if I feel the need, if I think I'm really going to enjoy Fable and I don't want to have to pay for a subscription to be a part of it, I can just buy it on PlayStation and play it whenever I want in 10 years or whatever the case is and not have to worry about a subscription price that's $30 a month or more. Probably more in a matter of time, I'm sure. But that's the developer direct. Cool beans. Next up, this one I think is an odd story because it's just I have not understood it up to this point, but here we are. Highguard has released. This was the big showstopper at the Game Awards that Jeff Keighley loves so much that he gave the spot to them for free, and was immediately hated by everybody. Really, it seemed everybody seemed to really not want this game to do well at the onset. And I don't know what they did to deserve that. I've been on record of saying I don't understand the backlash to this. This game has a good pedigree. It is from some of the people who made Titanfall and Apex Legends. So it has a very good shooter pedigree. And I don't know why that makes you think it's going to be bad. It's another hero shooter. But even from the initial reveal, I felt like I saw some ideas that seemed interesting. After that, the game went on a complete shutdown of all media. There has been no advertising for this game up since then. They just basically were hoping that the game was going to speak for itself at release. Well, unfortunately, that is not the case. It seems like the reviews right now are sitting at 13,000 negative reviews on Steam and 6,000 positive reviews. So overwhelmingly negative. However, I want to delve into that specifically. 100K concurrent players on Steam at release. That's massive. That is a huge debut. A very, very large amount of players. By the way, that's obviously, like I kind of implied, not including PlayStation or any other console. I'm pretty sure it was the only other platform it was on was PlayStation. So maybe Xbox, but PlayStation for sure. I'm sure there were at least 50,000 concurrents on PlayStation. No doubt, probably it's possible there were even more on PlayStation than Steam. We just don't have access to those numbers. So this was a massive launch. It was a massive launch. And then I saw people talking about, oh, well, now 2 days after release, it's only down, or I think it was more than that, maybe like 2 or 3 days after release, we're only down to 10,000 concurrent players on Highguard. This game has lost 90% of its user base. This game is a failure. What a flop. What a horrific horror story. I take great, not pride, but problem with that statement. That is goofy to say that is a problem. That is how every multiplayer game works. Every one of them. If you look at any multiplayer game, within a week, you have lost like 75% of your player base, no matter what. That's just how these things work. People play it for a week and they're done, even if it's like something like a Battlefield or a Call of Duty. Like those player bases drop off significantly after release. People get what they want from it, they move on, they don't like it, they don't play it anymore, whatever the case is, it is what it is. These typically always go in that pattern. Obviously, 90% of players is not as good as 75%. Obviously, that was just a statistic I pulled off the top of my head. I do know that it is a vast majority of players typically leave within the first few days. But in this case, 90%, you still have 10,000 concurrent players for a free-to-play game? Like, you're obviously going to lose a lot of players for a free-to-play game because they didn't have to pay anything to get in. So anybody is able to get in. Not only is anybody able to get in, but they have no monetary commitment to this at all. So, like, if you buy Battlefield 6 for $70, you're going to feel compelled to spend a little bit more time with that game because you just put $70 into it. Highguard, you didn't put anything. So if you don't like it, there's no harm in that. You just stop playing it. So obviously there's going to be a bigger drop-off there. It makes total sense. Keeping 10,000 players concurrently, that still makes it one of the biggest concurrent multiplayer games on Steam. Why are we acting like this is some monumental failure? Like, it honestly, 10,000 at release concurrent is insane. Like, that's a really good launch, especially for a game that had no marketing. The only marketing for it was one trailer at the Game Awards and then just everybody not shutting up about how much they hated it. That's really good. Do you know how many concurrent players Concord had? Way less than 100,000. Way less than 10,000. I believe it was estimated that there were only hundreds of people playing that game at launch. And it was a $40 game. Admittedly, that's $40, but only a few hundred people playing. Obviously, that's a failure. Obviously, that's not sustainable. Obviously, you're not going to have a community that rallies around that and then promotes it and makes it a big deal. And that's not what happened with Concord, obviously. It failed because even the people who played it were like, yeah, it's okay. And admittedly, so I played the tutorial of Highguard, haven't played a match yet. I see some issues with it, even just basic understanding of multiplayer games. I'm not going to say I'm a multiplayer fiend or understand multiplayer design well because I don't play very many multiplayer games, but even I can see some issues with Highguard. I thought 3v3 seemed a little sparse. I think the maps are a little too big. Even doing the tutorial, I felt that. I was like, I don't understand how you intend for me to find a player in this game. And that seems to be a very common complaint with the game. Overall, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas here, and that's coming from a guy who, again, doesn't play very many multiplayer games, but I think that Highguard has a very interesting structure that I wasn't aware of at all. Did anybody know what Highguard even was before release? Like, fully? Because they haven't talked about it. So I don't know. I had no idea what the frick Highguard was in terms of its modes or anything. So essentially you start off the game looting stuff and getting better gear, and then you move into like a capture the flag kind of mode, and then you move into a siege mode, and then you move into like a capture point mode, or like a Counter-Strike kind of mode where you're planting a bomb and trying to destroy an enemy base. I thought this was actually a really cool idea. Like the flow of basically having a narrative to all of these different modes within one match, I think is really a fun and interesting and unique idea that is, I think, in a lot of ways done well. I think the gunplay seemed fairly satisfying. I wasn't upset with that. I really do think that the 3v3 nature of it, it's really trying to lean into more of a Valorant style play, a more of a hardcore like esports vibe. And I don't care about that. I would think this would be way more fun as like a more casual experience, a more arcadey shooter that you could play with your friends and hop in and have a good time. And I'm not gonna say Apex is casual, but Apex is way more casual than Valorant. So like it feels a lot more like that. And I think if this game had a little bit more tweaking, a little bit more tuning, which could have maybe been helped by a open beta, which they were too afraid to do because everybody was being a little bick about this game and didn't want to play it, or didn't want to say anything nice about it for months, or really I think it wasn't months, it was just weeks. It's like a month. But I think this is a game that obviously people are not rallying behind. People were not expecting much out of, and people wanted it to die. And even with its death wanted, even people begging for this game to just fail miserably, you still have 100,000 people on Steam alone playing concurrently at launch. I'd say the backlash really helped it. But I also see enough people talking about this game that tried to give it a chance and are saying like, hey, honestly, there are some real problems with this game. It could have been way better and probably needed more time in the oven, probably needed more community feedback and for people to really get in on this and like tweak it a lot more. I see a lot of that conversation happening. Currently, the reviews on Metacritic / OpenCritic are sitting at like 67, 68. It is not being reviewed kindly. A lot of people seem to have the same issues I was referring to with some of the modes not, really being well designed for a 3v3 or the maps being too big. That seems to be the real focus of complaints with this game, and I think that's an easy fix. Here's the thing. Do I think it's an easy fix? Do I think this game really could have been something amazing? Absolutely. You give this game a year or two in the pot with community feedback, with it being like a live service, they're iterating it, they're trying to make it better over time kind of game. I think honestly, yeah, I think this could be a really fun game. I love the idea of all these modes kind of crescendoing into like a assault on an enemy base. Like I think that's really cool. I think some of the execution here is not well done and could be though. But I think you have to have a community that rallies behind it, and you have to have, and I think that still could happen. I think there's still thousands of people playing this game concurrently, and that's enough to keep a game alive. But I don't know if it's enough to make this game a Fortnite, an Apex Legends, something along those lines. Like, and with this space being so competitive, so hard to prosper in, it really makes a launch like this, which is like a middling launch. If it came out and people were like, this is the best game ever made, we really can't imagine a better game than this, I think this game has a real chance of success, but I don't see a game where everybody is already so against it, so vitriolic, hating this game. And then it comes out and it's like, it's okay. It really could be better. That is I think a really bad sign that I think this game could eventually evolve into something amazing. I don't think there's going to be a community there that's willing to work with that and wait for that and support the game while it transitions into amazing. And that's just the reality of this landscape, is you can't compete with these games that are these legacy Fortnites, Apex Legends that already have an established user base, already have a loop that is polished and refined and fun and constantly iterating, constantly adding, and constantly giving people reasons to come back. You have to really sink them early. You have to make these shots count. And it really does seem like I am currently on the fence of whether Highguard survives the remainder of the year. I think it's very possible that this community sees the writing on the wall and abandons ship, and the fixes that need to come for this game take too long. I fully see a reality where that can happen, but I also fully see a reality where this game could be something really good. Really, really good. And it's just really unfortunate that people really, I think, unjustly attacked this game and made it into some weird, just cry to hate something. I still don't understand it. I still don't understand why there was such a negative backlash to this game's announcement. Just because it was in the wrong slot? Just because, maybe Divinity should have been in the one more thing? I think that's just unjustified. I think it's unjustified. I think the game is fun for what it is, in all honesty. I think, yeah, sure. Is it more fun than a Fortnite? Is it more fun than an Apex Legends? Probably not at this point. But I think it's really unfortunate that it has the potential to just completely die because of that. And I think if that's the case, you're going to see it really be a hard thing for people to justify making, or not justify, but to succeed in this space moving forward is like, well, you have to be perfect at launch. You have to be an absolute banger at launch. Otherwise, there's no point. That's scary. That's scary. And I think we're seeing people comparing this to another Highguard or to another Concord. It makes sense. There's a lot of parallels, but I think there's a lot of stuff that Highguard is doing way differently than Concord did to stand out and to be different and interesting and fun. And it's still getting hated on like no other. So we'll see. I'm genuinely rooting for Highguard. I know people are saying it's a middling thing, but like I think what it's doing, I think I see the idea, I see the vision, and I would love for it to be something that people would take notes from and iterate on and maybe make better. But it's so sad to see so many people hate on this thing that it may never come to pass. But that's Highguard, if you were interested. And this just in, I just took a slight break. Sorry to break your immersion there, but Highguard has added a 5v5 mode, as we have spoken here on the podcast in the past, I guess by the time you're listening to this. But still, that proves to me that they are clearly trying to rapidly try to make improvements to the game. So, we'll see. A little bit more hope there. A little bit more hopeful. Does my tone sound more hopeful? Because it should. Look out for Highguard. Next up, we have impressions. Everybody loves a good impression, am I right? Well, we got a couple. Played a couple games over the past couple of weeks. One of those being Dispatch. Dispatch, everybody remembers Dispatch, right? Dispatch, I think, has a great story behind it. And I don't mean the actual game itself. I mean the creation of the game itself. It's a narrative choice-based game from ex-Telltale and Ubisoft developers. So it has a pedigree behind it. You can definitely tell the Telltale DNA in here, but it is a show that was originally being produced for Netflix, or a game that was originally being produced for Netflix. So you may remember that Netflix tried for a while to make like shows that you could make choices using like your remote instead of a controller. Weren't traditional games, but more so a Telltale style narrative. What the frick was that? Not Bangalore. I'm trying to think. Oh man, there was a Bandersnatch. That's what I'm thinking of. Bangalore is a city in India. Bandersnatch is a Netflix game from the Black Mirror series where you made choices and different things happen depending on what choices. It's actually very in-depth choice-based narrative there. There's like a spreadsheet of Bandersnatch of like choices you can make and how that affects the story. It's actually really in depth. Most choice-based narrative games do not get that in depth, but Bandersnatch certainly tried. But they tried to do that for a few things. They even like ported the Telltale Minecraft game to Netflix. You could make the choices using your remote instead of a controller. So they were kind of trying that in various ways. And Dispatch was also one of those potential ideas. The series was shelved at one point. It doesn't seem like it was a Netflix thing. It seemed like that was kind of a mutual decision on both of their parts. The developer itself even went on to make other things until Critical Role stepped in. Critical Role is a content creator of D&D. It was a bunch of anime and video game voice actors that kind of teamed up to be Dungeons and Dragons players on Twitch. They're actually the biggest Twitch channel in terms of revenue and subscribers and everything on the platform. So they're incredibly successful, incredibly lucrative. I wouldn't consider them content creators anymore. I think they're just a straight up company. And they came in and they said, hey, we actually like this game. We'd love to help produce it. So they did. They gave him the money, and they gave him obviously talent since they're voice actors. They produced, or they are a large number of the cast on the game. So it was brought back, and it was turned into a very critically successful and very commercially successful game. It was not nominated for much at the Game Awards this year, but it was very late in the year released, and it did win for like community choice or something like that, which was very, very surprising to me. So I love narrative choice-based games. It's one of my favorite things I think games can do is tell a story and have you be involved in it and make choices and feel more immersed in the narrative itself. Telltale's The Walking Dead is probably one of the best examples of this, and probably the reason I say that is because the magic of a narrative choice-based game had not yet been pulled away from me. I was still naive in thinking that a choice-based game really did mean I was making choices, and not just I was making choices that would all eventually lead to the exact same place no matter what. That's kind of something that choice-based games have been infamous for since really their inception. If you played Walking Dead, the Telltale Walking Dead game twice, you would very quickly realize that no matter what you chose, no matter who you chose to save or kill or whatever, the end result was always the same. So, unfortunate. And I've always been chasing that dragon ever since. I've always wanted a narrative choice-based game that gives me the ability to really feel like I'm making an impact in a world and that my choices matter and so on and so forth. I will say that Dispatch is not that, but it is a fun story with fun characters and surprisingly fun gameplay. The story itself follows a man named Robert Robertson, which is very easy to remember because of the redundancy there. But he's basically this universe's Iron Man. This is a superhero and supervillain filled universe, and he's this universe's Iron Man. And at the beginning of the game, he fights a villain, and his suit gets destroyed. And he doesn't have any money to repair it, so he has to work for a hero agency that dispatches heroes to, kind of deal with incidents around the city. So you are the dispatcher and you work on a terminal and you send out your heroes, and it just so happens the heroes you're assigned are all ex-villains who are trying to become heroes or turn over a new leaf or whatever the case is, and they all suck at being heroes. And so you have to kind of work with them and improve them and boost their stats and try to make them the best heroes they can possibly be, all the while trying to fall in love. That's really a lot of the main story elements of this game. As before I started playing this game, I was basically told this is playing a movie. Like, it didn't need to be a game. The gameplay here isn't significant, and that was what I was really afraid of for this. I hate to go back to Fantasy Critic again, but I'm going to. This game was one that I really stayed away from for a long time because I saw this as most narrative games tend to flop. Most narrative choice-based games tend to not do well, and it did seem like this gameplay seemed a little tacked on. It seemed a little tacked on, and it seemed like, knowing the history of the game, that it was originally a Netflix show, that the gameplay clearly wasn't a massive focus for the game, and so it probably was going to be something really small and probably something I didn't want to do, and every time I had to do it, I'd just be like, oh, not again. I have to do the freaking gameplay of this game again. Dang, I don't like that. So I was really expecting this to be a really good narrative, but a not good game. And I honestly definitely had my mind changed on that. The gameplay really focuses on you managing and micromanaging these heroes, building up their stats, kind of playing, with the RNG gods, and you have to kind of juggle, how all this stuff is working at the same time. And I really kind of got addicted to it, like that was the major criticism I heard people say is like, oh yeah, the gameplay is like meh. And I was like, honestly, not only is this gameplay good, but it's a significant part of the game as well. It's like a 50-50 split, which when people were like, oh yeah, you're really just playing a movie, I was like, well, then I guess the gameplay is there like for 5 minutes a chapter and you kind of bail on it pretty quick and it's never really a big deal. And it's like, no, it's really there a lot. Like I mean, I feel like I spent about as much time dispatching heroes as I did watching cutscenes, and I've I keep going back and forth on. I'm like, I don't know, did I? Because a huge part of this game definitely is the cutscenes and like making choices and dialogue and such as and so forth. But I actually do think it's about a 50-50 split. It's probably obviously not exactly, but like it's very much, it's way closer to 50-50 than I would have assumed. Um, there also is really well done like combination of both the story and the gameplay. That was another thing I was really worried about, is like, oh well, it's going to be so segmented. There's no way there's going to be any kind of merging of the narrative and the characters and the gameplay. It's just going to be, you're either watching the story or you're playing the game, and there's going to be no real overlap there. And I was pleasantly surprised that they did a really good job trying to really blend these elements together. So specifically, you'll have heroes, since they're ex-villains and they don't play nice with others and stuff like that, they'll go off and they'll do their own thing. And so like every once in a while, I wouldn't have a hero assigned to anything, but they would run off and they would do something, and then like a fire hero would run off and he would like go to a place, and you, Robert Robertson, would be like, hey, what are you doing over there? And then they would go back to base, and then you would see like an incident like just was reported where that hero was, and they like now it's on, a building is on fire. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny, or like one hero like gets depressed and due to events in the story, and so they go off and they go to like a park or something, and the entire day of dispatching, you're just kind of watching that hero at like a park, just kind of hanging out, and you can't use them. Or the chatter between heroes that they'll talk about events that that are happening throughout the story, or they'll banter with each other, and you'll get a better idea of their relationships with each other. And there's even a section of the game where you're forced to, that's honestly one of the two major choices in the game, is like you have to cut one of your heroes at one point if they're underperforming. And in this case, like if the day that you announced you're supposed to do that, the heroes start sabotaging each other. So you can increase your stats of succeeding on a mission if you double up and put 2 or more heroes on the same mission. But if you do that, they'll start sabotaging each other. So like it's a very they clearly thought about how you can integrate this gameplay with the story and the characters and make it more than just like, well, half of this game is gameplay, half this game is story. You have to get through the gameplay in order to get to the story. So just bear with it. Like I think they did a much better job than I ever really could have assumed they would have done with this kind of a gameplay, which, I thought it was going to be something pretty shallow and forced, and it ended up being really fun and addictive. I really enjoyed leveling up my heroes and trying to balance it, and kind of solving the puzzle of what needs to go where and what hero should I keep in reserve just in case I need them later, and made it a more enriching part of the game overall, right? So very impressed there. As for the story and the writing, which is the other major half of the game, right? I think that they're fun, but imperfect in a large margin. And I'm actually kind of surprised at how popular and well received the game is overall, given the writing and like what's going on in the story and the themes and so on. So in terms of a narrative choice based game, there's really only two choices that you make that are in any significance and impact to the story, at least that I felt. And that's one, when you cut a hero early on in the game, and that is a very forced decision. It is two heroes. By the way, they were not the two most underperforming heroes on my team at the time. It's just like, you have these two heroes that we've decided are the two that have to be the two heroes you cut, and you get to cut one of them. And then who your romantic interest is the other one. That's really a large part of this game, is the romantic interests. So you have Blonde Blazer, who you're introduced to at the very beginning of the game, and Invisigal, who's one of the heroes that you manage, and she's kind of like a bad girl, and Blonde Blazer's kind of like a preppy, perfect girl in a way. Invisigal is a very, very, very heavily focused on in this game, to a point where I genuinely think that if you chose Blonde Blazer, you're genuinely getting a lesser story. She's so major and such a major focus of the events and the story as a whole that if you don't choose her, I think you're going to miss a key dynamic and part of the game that it really intends for you to have. Like, the push and pull of her as a character, and rooting for her to succeed or change her ways or whatever, is just not going to be as impactful if you aren't also kind of rooting for her as a romantic interest more than just you're her friend. It could work, but like it wouldn't. The way that it's written, she's so overtly flirty and aggressive with you romantically that it would be just kind of awkward for you to turn her down and then also have this massive focus on her as like a redemption and like just a major king or linchpin of the story. So I never understood why they even gave you the option. Because like not Blue Blazer, but Blonde Blazer really doesn't have much impact on the story at all. It's really just to give the player something else to kind of jerk off to. And while I always appreciate more things to jerk off to, that's just not really what the story needed. The game's writing has gotten significant pushback. I've heard a lot of people say it's too vulgar, it's too many F-bombs being dropped, it's unnecessary. I hear a lot of people saying the same thing for like a Has-Been Hotel, but even that's way above what this is. I'd agree that this writing often feels like a 15-year-old teenage boy wrote it. It has a lot of excessive F-bombs. It has penises in your face, sex for no reason. There's just like a wet dream that just kind of comes out of nowhere and doesn't really need to be there. And while this does get better the further you go in the game, it's not as vulgar. It doesn't focus on that stuff as much. The beginning does feel a lot more aggressive. And I definitely like rolled my eyes a lot and was like, well, like why do we need this? Like why are we being so aggressive with our F-bombs, with our vulgarity? Like it just doesn't help anything. It doesn't add anything. It just feels like it's being like vulgar just to be adult. Like that's the only way to be adult, is just to drop F-bombs and like shove a penis in your face. I think a lot of people see a lot of what this game does vulgarly is like also good, in a way. I think there are elements of this game that they use as adult that are good, but I don't think like just dropping excessive F bombs is adult. It's more so like what you would think a teenager would think is adult, is like, oh, that's mature if I say the F word and if I draw a penis. Like that's mature. That's kind of how I at least interpreted the writing. I think it's honestly juvenile to a point of trying to be adult. I still feel like the writing fully redeemed itself. And you end up liking your squad alike. Like I think the characters as a whole are really where this game shines. Like I've heard people talk about the story and the themes and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I mean it's fine, but it's just kind of your traditional underdog story. Like I have to come in here and make this really bad team a great team. I've seen it before. I've watched a sports movie, okay? So this is nothing new. But I did feel like I genuinely cared for my little group of misfits, and even though they were all kind of messed up, they were my messed up. And I think that is the true driving heart of this game, is that relationship you build with your squad, and how they improve and grow as a part of the game and the narrative. So I think that's where this game really shines. I was able to beat this game in a single sitting on the weekend, probably like 8 hours, something along that. And I feel like I wished I had a little bit more time to delve further into the gameplay and the characters. I felt like, especially my squad, even though I say I really liked all of them, I don't feel like all of them really get a true moment to shine. There are some even characters that I think they wanted to give more time to, and they seemed somewhat relevant to the story, but they never really get so much of a focus that I'm like, oh, yeah, I feel satisfied with that character and the development and the relationship I have with them. So I would have really wanted more time. Also, the gameplay I never felt like really reached a crescendo. At the end of the game, I felt like I still wanted to level up my heroes. I still felt like it could get better. I understand for the difficulty curve they wanted, they didn't want me to be OP by the end of the game, but like I felt like it would have been satisfying to max out my characters or get to a certain point with them that I felt like they were really, really unstoppable. And I never got to that point. They were always just very good for what I needed, and that was about it. Animation and budget are very high here. It really does look and present like a show that would have been on Netflix. You have a lot of celebrity internet cameos, and obviously the main Jesse from Breaking Bad. I forget his name, sorry, but he's the lead. He's Robert Robertson. You can hardly tell. He does a great job in the role, but he is great, and the rest of the cast is really good. I would say it has a weird reliance on internet superstars here. Jacksepticeye is a minor role. Moist Critical is a minor role, and then Alana Pierce is also a minor role. Bro, I don't know why Alana Pierce is everywhere, but I guess somebody likes her, dude, because I can't get away from that girl. I get it, dude. She wrote on God of War at Santa Monica, but like I don't know. I don't, other than her being hot, like what has she done? Like, I don't know. But people really enjoy her for whatever reason other than her being hot. But whatever, dude. She's there. So you definitely get a nice overall experience with the presentation, I would say. I think overall as a game, I think it's a much more compelling package than I was expecting. Expected the gameplay to fall short. I expected story to probably fall short and narrative choices to fall short. I do think narrative choices ultimately do fall short, but you have such a fun story, I think it doesn't matter as much. I think it's a fun underdog story with charming characters and a surprisingly cool climax with addictive and well thought out gameplay that I wish I had more time with. I'm surprised the game has been met with such overwhelming praise, but I understand it. And I genuinely hope that we see something even bigger and better from the team in the future that has more time and more budget to cook. I want to see more decisions, even though I do not think that is the strong point of this game. I think you can only improve the game by adding more moments where the player really has to reflect and look back and think, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do here? And I love those moments. And I think that it really I think the gameplay was done well, but I think it was an obvious like side project for them. The main focus here was clearly the writing, the story, the presentation. The whole dispatch scenario ended up just kind of coming together, and I think they got lucky with it. And I think that even though there are good ideas here, they're not delved in enough to what I would have really wanted to see. So even though I had fun with it, I would love to have had more time with it and delved in further and see if now that they've had time to kind of figure out or had the ability to say, okay, yeah, people are okay with this. Like, I think this can work. I want to see how far they can get into that and maybe make it a real interesting strategy game of some kind because it is a little bit of a strategy game and a real interesting, like, tying that into the narrative even further, trying to make that even more immersive and give you more time to bond with those characters. I think that would be fantastic, and I would highly be looking forward to that product. Even though I don't see this really deserving a sequel per se, I would say it could certainly be a great one. So, Dispatch. Very, very pleasantly surprised with the game, even though I was personally looking forward to it prior to it coming out. It is currently number 3 best-selling game on Switch, which it just came out on Switch. And of course, there's a controversy around that. The nudity has been permanently filtered off. So I played it on PlayStation 5, And on PlayStation 5 and PC, I know you have the ability to toggle the adult content. So if you want to not see boobies or peenies or hear bad words, then you can turn those off and they'll bleep it and they'll blur it or put a black box over it. But on Switch, you have no recourse. There is no way for you to get around that. You have to accept it as a black box and a bleep. And it seems that this is a Nintendo thing. Obviously, the developer as well probably has to work with that. What it seems to be is it's a regional thing. So the developer uploaded one SKU of the game for all regions, and Nintendo was like, yeah, there are some regions where you cannot do that. So we can only allow the version of the game that is within that region. Like you basically have to meet all the qualifications for all regions or you don't get to be put on the service. So the way that around that typically is you have to make another SKU of the game and then put that up in those regions. So like that's what CD Projekt Red had to do with Cyberpunk. They had multiple SKUs for multiple regions because some of the nudity and sex in the game didn't meet guidelines with some specific regions. So they had to make multiple copies of the game essentially. It's I would think it's not a major problem to do that, but it's definitely work. It is definitely time, and it probably was just deemed like, yeah, how many people are really buying this game for the nudity and the f bombs? Like we're probably fine just leaving it censored. And that's what instead of putting development costs in to make an entirely different SKU that only has that, and I get it. It seems a little silly either way, but why not just make the other SKU? I would think it's not that big of an investment, but I am also not privy to how those development costs would be, so maybe it's more than I would think. But regardless, that's the big talking point around it right now. But overall, it's a great game. It's an 87 on Metacritic right now. I think that's a little high, but I'd say it's definitely a solid 85. Solid 85, and I definitely enjoyed my time with it for sure. Also played Super Mario Galaxy 2. Not number 1, but number 2. They re-released it on the Switch not long ago for an exorbitant fee of $70 for both Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Just went ahead and got them both because I wanted to really play Super Mario Galaxy 2. It is the highest rated Mario game of all time, and I'm a big platformer guy. I've always wanted to play Super Mario Galaxy, and I can't very easily because it's really difficult to emulate Wii games. Not to say I do that, but I do kind of think about it. But anyway, Super Mario Galaxy, because it's on the Wii, so difficult to emulate because then you have to emulate, like wagging motion controls, and then each level or each time you get a power up, the controls change. So you have to go into your emulator every time that happens and like manually change the emulation controls. It's a nightmare. And so I just never got around to it. I was like, please, hopefully they port this, or I'll even get a Wii and I'll just freaking play the game like locally on a console. Ended up not having to get around to that. Was on vacation this weekend. I went out of town with my wife and we played it together. It has a nice little 2-player mode. She was a little frustrated because she wasn't able to contribute as much as she wanted to, but overall, we have a good time with Mario. It's very family friendly. It's very colorful. It's great music and a lot of charm and personality. So it's fun to watch as well. She's not as big into playing as she is into watching, so it's always nice when I can incorporate her, but it's also good when it's a visually stimulating and constantly changing environment, which Super Mario Galaxy 2 is great at. It's really hard for me to like sit here and be like, what makes Super Mario Galaxy 2 so good? Like, have you played a 3D Mario game? Well, you know what the frick makes it good. Mario controls really freaking well. He controls better than probably any other platformer character ever made. The levels here are short but sweet, well designed. They are often changing. They are creative and different. They are constantly giving you something new and interesting. They don't allow you to focus on anything entirely. So like you have the ability to go to each planet and then get a star, kind of like Super Mario 64, like going into a painting. But in this case, like there are some stars that can only be gotten if you have like a secret coin, and then once you get the secret coin, like at a random point later in the game, that level will now have an extra star that you can go back to that's like a challenge. I think the difficulty curve here is astounding. I think Nintendo has been really bad about having a really bad difficulty curve in their most of their games, really, as of late. Most of their games that they put out now are like baby mode through credits. Like you have to roll credits, and then all of a sudden you get these really hard levels that are meant for people who actually want to play the game. Super Mario Galaxy starts easy and ramps up, and it slowly and slowly turns up the boiler on that until you get to the end of the game, and then you get really hard levels that you get like a secret galaxy. But even then, like I think there are a lot of optional stars that also produce a challenge. I think in terms of design, I genuinely am impressed with this game because it was on the Wii. You really didn't have like two analog sticks to control. Like you needed one analog. Like if you don't remember, we had a nunchuck attachment that gave you an analog stick. The original Wii remote did not have an analog stick at all. So if you wanted to control the Mario, you had to use an analog stick, and then you had to attach that to your controller, and then you would have basically no way to control the camera. So one thing that Super Mario 64 really pioneered and was probably, in my opinion, its crowning achievement was its camera control, because 3D games really didn't know how to do camera control yet. So in Super Mario Galaxy, you don't have an analog stick. So what Super Mario 64 did is the same thing Super Mario Galaxy does, which is it has to basically predetermine the best camera angle for you to have given a certain point. And in Super Mario 64, that's not as bad because most of the levels are fairly straightforward. They're fairly linear. You don't have to really run around and do a lot of crazy perspective changes or anything like that. In Super Mario Galaxy, you're doing crazy perspective changes all the time. You're running on walls, you're running around an entirely circular disk planet. You're doing crazy stuff that even at one point my wife was like, "This is giving me kind of motion sickness." And I was like, honestly, yeah, because it was very early on in the game and they were very much trying to teach the player like this is how the gravity works and the planet system works, and if you run around here, you just go to the other side of the planet because it's a singular circular sphere. Like that's just normal. And she was like, "This is kind of giving me motion sickness." And I was like, "I kind of get that, but like this could be so much worse. The fact that I have no way to really control the camera. There is like a forced camera change that you can use, but it's very rare I ever had to use that because its camera is so well designed. You have really no need to change the camera the vast majority of the time. And given the fact that, like I said, it's so varied in its camera changes and its perspectives and how wacky things are in the physics, you would assume it would be a nightmare to control a camera with this kind of a thing. Nope, absolutely not. It is very intuitive, very easy to do, and I really enjoyed doing it. Movement, obviously great. I only found a few small issues, like when I would try to turn around, sometimes Mario would just get stuck in a loop of just like running in a circle. And I was like, I can't get out of this. I'd have to completely stop and then execute the direction that I wanted to go. It definitely caused a few problems there. Few minor like platforming issues in terms of like phasing through a platform or something like that. But that's like if a platform was like coming into existence while I was like in the middle of it or something like that. So like I can kind of see where that was going to happen. I really appreciate the health system in the game. You have 3 hits, and then if you get a coin, you can get 1 health back. So you're always kind of looking at enemies as like a potential coin drop. You can also have multiple ways of killing enemies. Some ways kill in they give you star bits, and some ways kill and they give you coins. This typical stomp on them typically gives you coins, and then if you kick them once you've hit them, then they'll produce star bits. Star bits are things you need in order to progress and get extra levels in the game, and it gives you a little bit more depth in terms of deciding how to approach combat with enemies and what you're going to do. I think it's honestly like everything about this game is fun. Everything about this game is well done. I won't say that it does anything crazy different than any other Mario game. Like I don't look at this game and I don't compare it to Odyssey and say like, "Oh, frick, yeah, it's way better in this or it's way better in that." But it doesn't do anything wrong. Like it absolutely has no flaws outside of the minor ones I've kind of griped about. But like, I think a lot of people are willing to pass on those when they know this is just such a tight experience from beginning to end. What are you going to complain about? And the minor things really don't add up in the grand overall scheme of like what really is wrong with this game. And the answer is like, well, nothing. Like there's really nothing wrong with this game at all. So it's a fantastic game. It's a fantastic game. I wouldn't say it's like it being a 97 on Metacritic, one of the highest reviewed games of all time. I mean, this is just a really, really good platformer with no problems in it. So, like, I understand why nobody gave it below a 9, and most people gave it 10s. But I also would say there's also, like, not a lot to blow you away. It's just, like, a really well done game. Like, there's just nothing wrong with it. If you're looking for a good platformer, there's just nothing you can really find wrong with this one. And it really is tuned and balanced in such a way. I think that's really one of its crowning achievements, especially looking at like a modern day Nintendo. The balancing here is amazing, and the pacing here is amazing. I always felt like it was so easy for me to go back into a level and grab a star and feel like I really accomplished something in like 5 minutes. And that's such a good pace. Such a good pace. Took me about 15 hours to 100% it. And I enjoyed every minute of it, man. Every time I was like, oh man, there's a mystery star in this level. There's no way I'm gonna freaking find this thing. I'm gonna hate finding. I was like, no, it's actually not that hard to find. Like, I'm actually really pleased that I went back and was able to like. I never had to look up a walkthrough to find a secret or anything like that. Like everything, like is if I was really looking, if I was really trying, I could pretty much find every secret in the game. But like, I also could miss things on the first time through. It was just a matter of knowing where to look and how to look, and that's just really good balance, bro. That's just really good balance, keeping it easy enough that I don't feel like, oh frick, I have to go freaking look up a walkthrough to find this collectible, and also making it so that it's not like readily apparent and obvious and in my face of like immediately. Like that's just good. Everything here is just good game design. It's just good game design throughout, and there's just nothing really to complain about. Did you expect me to say anything wrong about Super Mario Galaxy 2, the highest rated game of all time? Yeah, I didn't think so. I didn't think so. Yeah, I was always just going to suck it off. Always just going to give a little kiss on the cheek. And I was expecting to be blown away by this game because of how well reviewed it is. But I ended up just coming out being like, yeah, that's an amazing game. But I get why I don't hear people be like, oh, yeah, this is a revolutionary platformer. Like, I hear people talk about Super Mario Odyssey, even though I think it has some game design issues. I do think overall, its movement is quite possibly the best movement ever in a platformer. It's the most expressive and well-tuned platformer ever made. So, like, I would definitely point to that game and be like, it's done some really amazing things. I would not point at Super Mario Galaxy and say it really did something crazy or it really did something super cool. It just did something, it just made such a well-polished product from beginning to end. There is really nothing you can complain about. Sorry. I keep going back. So I'm the platforming king. What can I say? I have to do this. It's a responsibility. I have to say Mario is good. Sorry. But that's going to wrap it up for impressions, and it's going to wrap it up for our show. This time on the Plug and Play podcast. Friends, I always appreciate you sticking around this long. 2 hours, guys. You could have watched like, I don't know, a movie in theaters. But instead, hopefully you were doing this in like working out or doing chores around the house or even grinding in a JRPG that probably didn't need that grind, but you chose to listen to me. And I genuinely appreciate that, and I cannot express, and I say this every episode, and this is not something I script or anything, but it's genuinely how I want to close out every episode, is to thank you. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking that I'm worth hearing. And not everybody gets that. Not everybody can afford that. And by afford that, I mean not everybody, I guess, is egotistical enough to put themselves talking for hours and hours and hours out on the internet and hoping people care. But that's one of the scariest things about putting things out on the internet is hopefully what if nobody cares? What if people hear me and they hate me? And I have fortunately had people that are at least listening, at the very least, and that's something I'm very, very grateful for. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you play video games, and I appreciate playing video games too. So I hope you hear from me next time on the Plug and Play podcast, friend. I'll leave you to your video games and whatever else is going on in life. I hope it's going well. And that'll be enough from my rambling. And I will see you next time. Bye bye.